Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art and culture, and now it's a big one, the newest project from McKinley Dixon, Magic Alive. You know, it's a little uncanny that since 2021 I've been singing McKinley Dixon's praises, and in 2025 it feels like a lot of folks have finally caught up. Maybe it just took a while to get on board, with 2023's beloved Paradise Jazz as the primary entry point for a lot of new fans, even if I would argue his more expansive and conceptual 2021 album, For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her, was stronger, the best album of that year, and even then there's a tangled density in his writing and his flows that demands you take the time to catch up. But regardless of how you get there, I was thrilled to see the avalanche of critical acclaim for this newest album, Magic Alive. Reportedly high concept, exploring a group of boys trying to bring their fallen friend back from the dead, full of freewheeling and jazzy live instrumentation that has become a hallmark of his sound. So okay, for me, where does it fall? Well, honestly, I've wrestled with this one a little bit more than I thought I would. It is great with the high floor that I've come to expect from McKinley Dixon, an incredibly expressive and talented rapper with a sort of deceptively dense metaphors that ultimately break into a really potent emotive through line about family, grief, and the power of words, along with some very deliberate callbacks to his career and taking stock of where he is in and amidst some high concept storytelling, backed up by the sort of dense live jazz instrumental that's probably going to be thrilling to hear and experience live in concert. Even despite its conceptual framework, I can hear an album that is very clearly built for the bigger stages that are on the road. But again, McKinley Dixon has set a very high bar for himself. When I say that this isn't quite my favorite of his, that's probably still For My Mama, although as a whole I'd probably give this the edge over beloved Paradise Jazz, I think there is some nuance that fully comes in exploring as to why. So yeah, that's why this review might run a little long. And again, I want to start with that high concept because it feels both familiar as a fan of McKinley Dixon, but also ambitious in its own right. After the funeral of a close friend, three young boys get together and discover a magic that's capable of bringing people back to life. Let's make this clear. It's an incredibly cool and layered concept, especially when you consider that magic is both translated through touch and through words. And McKinley Dixon is less interested in telling a straightforward narrative with characters than a series of snapshots of how that power could manifest, what it might actually mean. For one, the gospel-infused religious metaphor becomes, well, kind of obvious, not just in the terms of the resurrection, but also stories of Lazarus and iconography there, where McKinley Dixon is self-aware enough to reference how often he uses angel wings as a metaphor on All the Loved Ones, What Would We Do, as a sign of being heavenly bound, interwoven with that of Icarus, in both transcendence but also loss and tragedy. So references to the afterlife, heaven and hell are also very commonplace, alongside how one's morals might be out of easy alignment with such a binary. Recitatif is really playing into that between its more deliberate heavenly first half before it transitions with that sizzling hellish pulse with that growling guitar, just hell-bent on being heaven sent, burning through whatever's next just to find out what forever meant. And by the title track, we get a flicker of some of that anime influence that McKinley Dixon has in killing God for getting a little too close to him. That's layered in its own right. Because like with the last two albums, there is that street level acknowledgement and populism of what some black kids face on the streets and some of the violence therein. Where if you introduce the concept of immortality to those who will bang with their set, or at least the ability to be brought back to life like on Sugar Water, that can be both thrilling and terrifying. Not just the one who's being brought back with another chance, but also the kids who now recognize how dangerous it can all be. It's also worth highlighting the sense of freewheeling play in all of this, which translate both thematically and in execution. Of course, the bars are going to tumble over each other with exuberance. Even if the word choice itself can be painstakingly direct, you can parse what he's saying if you keep up, but also highlighting how many kids have been forced to grow up too fast, where joy is held on a knife's edge or at the barrel of a gun, how that sort of newfound power to buck against it, how that might manifest emotionally. And of course, the literal is blended with the metaphorical, when you realize that magic often correlates with poetry. On Fistful of Light, he references how the power comes from his grandfather's words, an interesting juxtaposition to the anti-colonial challenge on language and framing from Billy Woods on his album this year, but also art made about those who pass that gives those people a second life in songs, but oftentimes that art is rooted in tragedy, or it captures a viewpoint of someone passing while ignoring the larger context of their life, or their environment, or their family. The last of which reflects a complicated relationship and trauma cycle McKinley Dixon's explored before. And thus there's also an interrogation of the responsibility some might have utilizing that magic, not just in community and a sense of one's place, but also to oneself and the process of grieving, or survivor's guilt, or moving on. And when you consider that most of McKinley Dixon's last two albums were personally rooted in emotions tied to the friend that he lost, which has then taken him on the road with success away from home to tell that story, yeah, the self-referential arc makes all the more sense. Listen Gentle becomes a crux point of this late on the album, where it snaps that grief and guilt into focus as an older relative tries to show a magic trick to both lighten the mood, but also then shape some of that power. But by the end of the song, the power spirals out of control. How the message and power of art can go beyond whatever it was meant to in the time. And it truly crystallizes on the final song, Could Have Been Different, where Blue shows up as a poster of a rapper on the wall who encourages McKinley Dixon to find some of that self-affirmation in art, embracing that complexity in all, where the hook is rooted with the grew up making humble packs like the world will know our name, now we're staring out the window, pray these wings can hold our frame, where the line that he's thinking about jumping off the roof mingles grief with a prayer for transcendence. It could be both. It likely is. Now, if you found all this hard to follow listening to the project, that there is a lot of complex ideas being thrown at you amidst the jazzy blast of horns and impeccably tight flows, yeah, you know what, that's just true. It's easier to ride the kinetic rapture of the technical flair on display, where the melodic color and palette paired with banger after banger, it's gonna overwhelm you. On some level, again, it feels like kids at play. A frenetic energy where it's less about questioning the logic of how it all works and more about being taken along for the ride, that it makes thematic sense, and it's so bright and colorful that it's easy to get caught up in the emotionality. At the same time, when you have such a powerful and layered concept at the core, even if you're not looking to make a straightforward narrative or have your guest rappers play more distinctive character roles, it's hard to escape the feeling that a little bit more space to breathe might help a bit. Fully sit in these spaces and these ideas, paint a more stark picture of the world rather than consistently rely on the backdrop that previous albums conveniently established. I know where McKinley Dixon is setting these songs, a little bit more detail might have helped. I would have loved to see more of these ideas receive greater exploration across more voices. This is an album that could have run for another 20 minutes with a little bit more room to breathe, soak in that hot summer atmosphere where apparently heaven must be hotter outside. I would have been just fine with it. Some of this also comes with a near breathless pacing and the jazz elements leaning into a more chaotic and cacophonous mix, probably best shown on the joyous danger of the title track that did remind me a lot of Brown Shoulders in the flow, but sometimes to a little questionable results, like how Fistful of Light careens across free jazz contortions, or some of those painful squeals across Crooked Stick. Even if I kinda love its uncanny swagger, I think Gais Guevara may have gotten the better of their collaborations this year on his album. And while I love the texture that comes with all the live clattering percussion, the horns that are at full volume, the accents of strings and guitars and pianos and woodwinds, after the slow plucky build of Watch My Hands, which is also a cute little magic reference there in order to set the scene, a little bit more diversity in the tempo, or perhaps more prominent driving bass, would have helped more individual melodic moments pop off, which might be why I would question whether or not there was an individual song here that stands out as as strongly as McKinley Dixon's best. Oh, let me stress, there are tracks that get damn close. Listen Gentle feels damn near cinematic with its arrangement. I goddamn love that killer groove that slowly builds with the uncanny dread with Quelle Chris on Sugar Water, opposite Anjimile's mournful hook. The ominous pianos and horns set up a very worthy sequel to Run Run Run. I love the hazy patter and the amazingly sticky hook on All the Loved Ones, even if I don't quite love the guest verses. And We're Outside Rejoice has such a perfect sax-inflected slow build amidst the bird song and the organ, and again, I just wish it went longer like those 70s jazzy soul jams that it recalls for me. Maybe it's just increased familiarity with how McKinley Dixon structures his songs and his hooks that I found myself listening for where he would swerve off the formula, like the trap elements of Tyler Forever or the twisted piano crescendo of Make a Poet Black. Whereas this album has those wow moments, but they're more tightly blended, more cohesive, but less individually idiosyncratic, for better or for worse. But you know, at the end of the day, if my strongest critique is that I just want more of McKinley Dixon, where the ideas are grounded in what you know from him, but are also so freewheeling that I'd love to hear more follow-through, that is a pretty limited, nitpicking critique indeed, and this is the sort of record that only deepens its appeal with more listens. It absolutely works at the gym, believe it or not. I also don't particularly care to hear the argument about live versus program percussion with McKinley Dixon, and how live percussion might get fetishized over the drum machines. It's painfully reductive, weirdly contrarian. I never see that discourse brought out when folks talk about the roots, and McKinley Dixon can rap over all of it. He has proven that this decade. And again, even if I am gonna nitpick, it's still gonna be one of the best rap albums of 2025, and this has been a strong year for hip-hop, possibly albums overall. Again, not my favorite of his, for my mama kinda nailed the diversity of tempo and pacing this doesn't quite capture, but it's gonna be a close second, and it's probably gonna kill life with his band. I am sure of that. Folks, I've been saying it's time to get on board with McKinley Dixon for 4 years now, and it seems like people are finally ready to do so. And if that's not magic, I don't know what is. Please, folks, give this a shot. So worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Again, this album is so much fun. I highly, highly recommend it. I definitely want to say that with more listens, it absolutely gets increasingly strong. The more layers you unpack of it, it's just such a vibrant world to experience. And I still love how McKinley Dixon approaches moral dilemmas and questions, bathing it all in light, fully demanding the audience embrace that complexity. That is just incredibly compelling to me. And again, he's one of the best rappers working in the underground right now. Actually, scratch that, one of the best rappers working right now. I'll stand by that, and he's even better live. But beyond that, if you guys have comments, leave them down there below. I'm happy to see where you guys think this lies in his catalog overall. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved in potentially getting albums on my schedule when I reopen it in July, or just supporting the channel, or arguing with me on my Discord, link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times out there, but again, options available. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.